Thank you so much. I'm hoping everyone can hear me clearly. Welcome to you all. I'm very excited to be with you this evening. And so I just want to take a couple moments before we get into this presentation, this webinar. I know that I have no chat capabilities, which is kind of a bummer because I like to engage with people, but we're going to take a couple moments to just ground ourselves and to prepare for this presentation. So before we start to move on, I just want to make sure that everyone has a few things nearby, okay? And those things would be that you're in a comfortable setting, that you maybe have something to drink with you, or, if you need snacks, all those things. And also that we're coming into this space with an open mind. So there's going to be some elements of this presentation. I don't think any of these are like groundbreaking in terms of things we've never heard before. They might be a little bit surprising. There might be some things in here that folks find to be triggering. So I want folks to take care of themselves throughout this presentation. If you need to take breaks or anything like that, please do so. I would also encourage you to have something nearby so that you can take notes, okay? And so I like to start all of my practices, whether I am leading in the classroom or whether I am in a yoga studio, with giving the group an opportunity to ground, okay? So with that being said, if it feels comfortable for you to close your eyes, then I welcome you to close your eyes, but you could settle your gaze on the screen or on your keyboard or on a wall or anything like that. And for the first few moments, we will take some time just for you to connect with your natural pattern of your breathing. So just observing your breath as it comes into your body, observing your breath as your breath exits your body, taking a moment to acknowledge any thoughts that are crossing your mind right now, taking another moment to observe any feelings, any tension or discomfort that you might have in your body. So just kind of scanning from head to toe the state of your physical body. And also taking a moment to acknowledge the state of your heart space, your emotional state right now. Noticing if you're feeling heavy. I know it's midweek. We all have lots of responsibilities. So just taking a moment to acknowledge if you are feeling at all heavy. And also acknowledging if you're content with how you feel. And the last thing that I'll offer as a check-in is your intention for joining this webinar. What are you hoping to get out of this? What are you, looking for? What kind of information? And how might you use some of this information as you move forward for yourself, first and foremost, right? And then I'll encourage you to maybe take a deep breath in through your nose. Release the breath from your mouth. Maybe roll your shoulders back a few times. Move your head around a little bit. And we are going to begin. So this presentation is about self-care wellness as forms of resistance. We all are very familiar with the spaces where we're teaching, the spaces where you might be an administrator, and what those spaces look like. So the overview of this webinar is we will begin to unpack the essence of self-care and wellness as essential transformative acts, especially in the context of challenging oppressive and outdated norms. So I want everyone to take a second and just think about what you see self-care as, right? Don't get too deep into it, like don't hyperanalyze it, but when someone says self-care to you, what are some things that pop into your mind? And if you have a writing utensil, just write those things down really quickly, maybe 2 words, 2 or 3 words that come into your mind when you think about self-care. And I will not insert my my thoughts, but I want you to just write down 2 or 3 things or practices or ideas that pop into your mind when you think about self-care. Okay. Now, I'll move back a little bit. Sorry, friends. All right. So, how are self-care and wellness connected to resistance? Self-care often viewed as indulgent pampering. So look at those words that you wrote down and notice if any of the things that you wrote down have anything to do with like spa days or getting your nails done or manicures, pedicures, massages, kind of like one-off activities or things that you might associate, automatically with self-care or wellness. Okay. That is actually a practice of self-soothing. And people don't really talk about it in that way, but it's not an actual practice of self-care because it's not usually something that people are doing consistently, right? Maybe the manicures, but it's not something that you would do over a long extended period of time that's actually going to change how you're feeling in the long term. Some people look at it as indulgent, right? Indulgent pampering, like massages and things like this. Okay. Self-care is a multidimensional practice. Okay. And it is really vital for how we balance our lives, how we take care of ourselves, and actually developing a regimen. So, right now, moving forward, we're going to kind of try to separate the idea that self-care is only, massages or brunches or things like that. So we're going to start to kind of shift away from that and move into some other ideas around self-care, okay? Because it does play a fundamental role in how you maintain your health, your dignity, and your agency. What do you associate with rest, self-care, okay, wellness? What are some things that you connect to? In our society, we definitely know, right? And I wish we could engage through chat just for some affirmations of these things. But slowing down, resting, pausing, I think culturally, right? It's associated to some things that are not so positive, right? When we think about resting, or if our elders have ever seen us resting in our youth, there are certain words that have been attached to like us not being productive. Okay, so I want you to take a moment, think about the word rest. Think about your relationship with the word rest and think about what immediately comes to mind when you think about that word. Okay. The next thing I would like you to do is think about the origins of why you might have those associations with the word rest. I know for myself, an only child who was often running around doing things, and then coming in very tired, that many people were wondering how lazy I might be. And that might be something that other folks can connect with, right? Like rest and laziness is often connected to one another. We might even see ourselves as being, kind of lazy or feeling a particular way about not being productive in moments where we are seeking rest. Okay. And how far back do the thoughts that we might have about rest, how far back do they go? Are they connected to like your parents, your grandparents, your family, your ancestors? Is this something that's been passed on to you, this thought about rest and self-care? Has it been passed on through generations, or is it a thought process that you have cultivated for yourself? So just some things to think about. I'm going to try to move some things around on my screen here. All right. The historical truth of cultural self-care and wellness. Now, although I said in the beginning when we first started that a lot of our thoughts around self-care connected to massages, going out for brunch or getting your nails done and things like that, However, there are generations of practices that our ancestors have had in terms of long-term self-care and wellness practices. So things like being very connected to the earth, right? Like gathering food, growing food, spending time in community with one another, leaning on community. There's so much cultural practice for individuals from diverse backgrounds that are thinking about what wellness and self-care actually are outside of these ideas that we might have presently. So just taking a moment to think about that, and then thinking about how and when we may have become disconnected from those things when we're thinking about taking care of our overall well-being. Now, for the next moment, before I move on to the next slide, I want everyone to take another moment, think about maybe one or two, okay, practices, if you can, that are embedded within your family culture. Things that either you do presently or that family members, parents, grandparents, before that, practices, cultural practices that have been done to maintain some level of wellness or a sense of community. It can be one thing that you write down. And if you don't have anything, maybe thinking about something that you might like to develop, a practice that you might like to develop based on your culture. And we'll take a moment to jot down a couple of things. There's so many practices that even myself as a wellness practitioner that I encounter with folks, and and I've had people also ask questions about the foundation of some of these practices, in terms of wondering, if things are positive or if they're things that should be carried on. So I do think examining the origin of our practices culturally is really important, and to think about when folks may have become disconnected from them and why we don't see those things as part of a self-care or wellness practice. Redefining self-care. So we're just going to take a second to read through this, okay? I'm going to read it aloud, but I do want folks to also just take a moment to look through this. We're going to start off with physical self-care and the idea of physical self-care. Okay, and this goes beyond spa days, as I mentioned, and treating oneself to luxury items. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but we're thinking about different concepts. How you nourish your body with proper nutrition, how you're engaging in some level of physical activity, even if it's a walk or, stretching a couple times a day. This next one, which I know can be really challenging, especially if you're working in an educational environment, is ensuring that you're getting adequate rest. And I know for myself, that's a really challenging one, even for somebody who is teaching and practicing yoga. I don't always practice what I preach. But getting sleep, and also attending to medical needs, which can be challenging, right? If you don't have access to these things. But all of this does fall into physical self-care and what we are doing to make sure that our fundamental needs are being met in respect to our bodies. I'll move on. Emotional self-care. This involves recognizing and respecting one's feelings and seeking appropriate avenues for expressing and processing emotions, whether through a form of therapy, writing, journaling, creative or artistic pursuits. Emotional self-care is about developing healthy coping mechanisms to navigate life's ups and downs. So just thinking about, okay, before we move on, any practices that you might have for the previous slide, which is physical self-care, either something that you do, one thing that you presently do, or one thing that you might like to do, okay? And the same for emotional self-care, thinking about one thing that you might practice presently that supports your emotional self-care, your emotional well-being. And if you don't have a practice presently, maybe something that you could develop in terms of some of the things that I've suggested here, or something that's not here that you can think about. Something to support your emotional well-being. Next is mental self-care. Engaging in activities that stimulate and challenge the mind. These things are critical. Mental self-care also includes setting boundaries, which I know can be really challenging if you're working in a school environment, particularly with information and media consumption, to prevent overload and maintain mental clarity and peace. Now, I'm going to take a moment on this one, especially because there is so much going on right now in the world, right? And I think that in general, as a society, we are consuming a lot, and I'm not talking about food, right? I'm talking about media, information. There's so much going on in the world right now, and a lot of us are, scrolling and reading and taking that all in, and it does have an impact. So thinking about the ways in which we are consuming these types of things and what kind of impact that's having on our mental well-being, your mental well-being, and maybe some strategies for kind of developing like a time frame or how much you're consuming, how so that you're not becoming extremely stressed, through these processes. So maybe take a moment, think about how you're engaging with information, thinking about how you engage with media or social media, whether it's the news, any social media outlet, thinking about if you are a person who maybe takes their time to go through like the things that you're following, the people that you're following, if it feels like you're having this repetitive, like, showing of really stressful information, taking social media breaks or media breaks so that your nervous system has the opportunity to kind of settle in and kind of release these things, but really thinking about the impact. Some people call it doom scrolling. I don't necessarily always call it that, but I think it's an appropriate wording for kind of what we're seeing on social media, especially right now. And it's not to say that we're turning our backs to what's happening in the world, but it's more so that we're being intentionally about the way that we're engaging with these things so that we are allowing ourselves the space to have a sense of peace and some clarity. And this is a really important one for me, and I talk about it a lot within wellness spaces, just being mindful, because I think it's easy to get caught up in this because these phones are in our hands pretty frequently. Okay, so just thinking about that as we move on. This one right here, friends, okay? Professional self-care. I don't know if anyone has ever spoken to you about this, like in this, framework. But I think for folks who work in education and myself and deeply included in this, right, thinking about the workplace and the various things that we encounter as educators, administrators, paras, whatever your role is, if you're an enrichment teacher, no matter what, right? Working in school environments can be extremely stressful. There's a lot of different energies in that space, right? You're talking supervisors, you're speaking with students, families, never mind if you have your own families on top of that, right? So thinking about healthy boundaries within these settings, thinking about how you can separate yourself when you need to and not hold any guilt for that. So maybe thinking about taking a second, thinking about any stresses that you're experiencing in the workplace, even if you don't work at a school, because I don't want to assume that everyone here is is within a school. We don't know. And thinking about how you're impacted. It's Wednesday. What does your week look like so far? And then thinking about boundaries that you maybe do have in place or boundaries that you don't. I'll give an example for myself just to kind of encourage some thought. I am the only person in my school who teaches every student, right? So we have a small student body, but I have direct contact with each child because I'm teaching every grade level yoga and meditation. I also am a facilitator of an affinity group. So that's another group of children, but I'm co-leading that space. So I'm engaging with the parents in a different way within that space. Then I'm on a committee, right? I'm like a co-chair of a committee. So that just that in itself is 3 different spaces, right? Never mind like anything that I have to do just as an educator, progress reports, answering emails, like weekly, bi-weekly meetings. That's a lot. So for myself, there's a time frame where I don't answer emails. I have already kind of let folks know that if it's not an emergency, don't expect me to respond to your email immediately. I will get back to your email in at least 24 hours unless it needs immediate attention, but just boundaries, right? Being able to tell folks, I would love to support you in that, or I would love to do that for you, but I don't have the capacity for that right now, and not feeling guilty about it, right? And just being really intentional about the space that I create for myself so that I'm not feeling pressured and stressed and overwhelmed. It took a long time. I've been teaching for like 14 years. It took me 11 years to figure that out, to be honest with you. So just thinking about setting boundaries in the workplace, thinking about how you can create some distance from some of these things when you're not in school, so that you're not always coming into the space feeling like you need to catch up, or like you're not getting things done, or like you're just running in a circle. Okay, something to think about. Professional self-care is a thing. Professional self-care, it's important. This is one of my favorites. Even though I'm kind of an introvert, I'm really an introvert, y'all. Social self-care, okay? Community is so important. And I think there's so many ways, I think, especially not, I can't say post-COVID because we know that we are still very much in it and these numbers are very high. But there's been kind of some shifts in the way that folks socially engage, right? But thinking about this aspect and emphasizing the deep importance of nurturing relationships and where you're receiving your support and love and understanding, and where you can speak to folks who understand what things look like for you, even if they themselves don't work in the same environment. But thinking about how you're creating some self-care socially, not and I don't mean like not just in like going out and doing fun things, but really how you're creating like nurturing environments for yourself, or you're leaning on community, so that you feel supported. It's really important. There's something that happened recently, and I'm sure everyone's seen it, where someone was deeply impacted by all the stresses that they were encountering in their work environment. And so we never know how deep people are experiencing those things and what the overall impact of it is. But it's really important to your overall well-being to make sure that you have senses of community and spaces where you can be held. Especially, I feel like educators will always giving, right? Like we are the soft space for so many people in so many spaces. And I think it almost feels unnatural sometimes for us to, be like, hey, I need the same level of care that I am offering out to my school community, but it's really important. So just thinking about how you're being held, or ways that you can seek out some nurturing and some care, some softness for yourselves. Now, what cultural self-care can look like. Now, I touched on this a little bit earlier, and I'm circling back to it because I really want folks to think about this. Um, I'm mostly talking about this because I think there's so many of our cultural practices that we've, as a society get pulled away from, because we live in a Western society, and there's so many things that are pushed out to us in place of cultural practices. So thinking about actions that focus on like natural holistic approaches to your health or maintaining connection to nature. It's definitely a typo here. Developing relationships within community. Um, and thinking about like culturally, and this is not to exclude anyone here, but just thinking about the different ways that folks gather, right? And the different ways that folks support one another. I think that there's some really beautiful, practices within culture and community for people of color, and anyone who has, a tie to their culture. So just thinking about what that looks like and what that maybe has looked like for your ancestors and how some of that can be pulled into the way that you're supporting yourselves. Okay. This quote by Audre Lorde is one of my favorites, and it's one that is hanging up in my classroom. I send it to people all the time. And it's something that I believe in. And it's caring for myself is not self-indulgent. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. The focus of this webinar, right, is kind of how to radicalize, like see your wellness and your self-care as a radical act. Because there are so many things that we are required to do every day that pull us away from even acknowledging our needs. So I really want folks to think about that, right? To think about your care as a way to kind of push back against these systems that are created to kind of just have us moving like nonstop, like creating, producing, doing, right? What are the things that you can do to start to pull yourself away from that? I know we all have to go to work. Mortgage and rent is really high right now, right? So we do have to support ourselves, but we also need to support our heart spaces, right? We need to support our mental well-being. We need to have soft spaces to land. And so creating those spaces, because they will not necessarily be created for us, and also prioritizing those spaces, using your PTO, right? Like using these things and not feeling guilty about it, because I think that's a big part of it too, right? As we might have built in things where we can take time, but the guilt, right, of feeling like if you're doing something for yourself that you're letting someone down, like you're letting your students down or you're letting your school community down. And the reality is that you are better. You are a better person. Like you are a better advocate. You are a better educator. You are a better administrator when you are well taken care of. You show up differently when you're well rested, when you're well hydrated, when you have cultivated levels of joy for yourself, right? Think about how you come back to school after a long break, right? Hopefully, and I know even at home sometimes it can be kind of not always a full rest, right? But the hope is that you're coming back into the space somewhat rejuvenated because you've had some time for yourself. How can you create those pockets of time, not just during break? How can you self-preserve so that you are showing up, never mind better for your students, but better for yourself, so that you feel comfortable in your body, so that you feel like, you're showing up as your best self for yourself, not so that you can be more productive, right? but so that you feel good, so that you're navigating your life in a space where you have some ease, where you can roll your shoulders back, right? Where you can soften a little bit. This quote is really, it's a really important one to me, and it's something to think about. Okay. So this is something, again, that I'm returning to, that I mentioned initially in the beginning. What is your relationship with the concept of rest or even self-care? Okay. It can be, both of these things can be defined in many different ways. Okay. But how do you define it? How do you engage in rest or a sense of ease on a daily basis? It's 6:35 right now. What's one thing, write down one thing, if you have it, right? One thing that you've done for yourself today. One thing that let you be soft. And it might be nothing. If it's nothing, I don't want you to feel bad about it. But if it's nothing, that's my point, right? The day is almost over. And how often do we go through a series of days and not really have done anything to allow yourself to be soft, or to really rest, or to do something that, is comforting to your spirit? So something to think about. And do you view these things as like something that you need to earn? Do you say like, I'm gonna work really hard throughout this week, and then maybe Saturday I'll treat myself right, to a nap, or I'll treat myself to, getting, a manicure, or I'll treat myself to like the thing. But why does it have to be a treat? Why can't it be something that is embedded into the way that you care for yourself, because you deserve that? Not because you earned it, but because you deserve it, because you're a human and we deserve nice things, but we also deserve like softness, and we deserve to not always have to be strong and working all the time. Right? So thinking about that, thinking about if your soft moments or your indulgent moments are associated with reward, and why? Why can't you see these things as just things you're deserving of as a human being who has needs? Okay. And also, do you rest or practice self-care so that you can show up as like a productive person? All right. Is your relationship with rest and self-care tied to productivity? That's something to think about too. I see it a lot, where people are like, oh, I got up and I run 5 miles every day so that I can, so when I show up to work, like I'm reinvigorated, I'm ready to go. Do you have the same level of like attentiveness to your care just for yourself? Right? Like, I'm running 5 miles because it's good for my body. Or like, I don't know, I went for a swim because it feels good to my body. Just thinking about that, right? Thinking about the things that we associate with productivity and the reasons why we're doing it, versus bringing it back to yourself as, I went to the beach because I deserve to go to the beach. I had a staycation because I deserve that. Or, like, I'm doing these things because they are going to sustain me in the long run, not so that I can show up as a more productive faculty member or, a worker. So something to think about. How does the programming that you may receive from society impact your ability to rest or focus on self-care? What are some ideas or frameworks that you have developed or adopted around rest that have been the result of societal or systemic messaging? And so thinking about that too, right? Why do you feel the way you feel about rest? If you feel any particular way, right? I have no way of knowing, we cannot communicate through chat. So, I have no way of receiving feedback, but really thinking about it, what are the roots of your feelings and your ideas around self-care? How much are these things impacted by what society says about being productive? Okay. And are these things intergenerational or familial messaging? I already told you about how my family members, were thinking about me, which is interesting because now my grandmother's talking to me about how hard I work and how I need to rest. But definitely wasn't the case when I was a kid. Definitely was wondering why I wasn't working more. But where do these ideas come from? What is the foundation of these ideas that we have around rest and self-care? Did you see your family members resting? Did you see your parents or your grandparents or the folks who cared for you? Did you see them rest? Did you see them vacation? Did you see them really taking care of themselves? Or did you see them working really hard all the time, to support your family? Like, just thinking about where these ideas and thoughts about how we should be navigating this life, like where they come from and how they get embedded. It's important, right? And it's not to say that these things are wrong, right? Because families do have to be sustained and there are bills and there are things, but just thinking about like what we have bared witness to in terms of our caregivers and our family members and how that may have planted a seed for us. How can you begin to reimagine rest and self-care? Okay. So this image to me is lovely because to me, this is this person ascending, right? Like just leaving the space into something greater and brighter in my mind, right? So I've included this image because that's how I see this, is this person just kind of like moving up and away from. Self-care provides an opportunity for liberation, healing, and for creative and empowering thought. How can you begin to create space for rest in your daily lives so that you are not existing in a space of burnout or deficiency? I don't know if we have this on here. Usually on Zoom, there's like a thing where you can put like a thumbs up or a heart. Do we have that capability on here right now? It's like a response option. I'm looking for it. Yeah, yes. Okay, great. I just want to see if how many people I can actually view here. I really would like to know, and you can give off, I don't know if we want to heart this, right? But give a thumbs up if in the last school year, why don't we say 2023 to 2024 school year, you have experienced any level of burnout, any feelings of burnout. Raise a hand, you can pop it in there. There's a little option for your hands. Okay. Any level of burnout. It's a lot of hands. It's a lot of hands. And I'm still watching the hands pop up. That's a lot of people. What does that tell us about the work, personal life, disbalance, right? Imbalance. Because we're all so dedicated, right? We're dedicated to our school communities. We're dedicated to our families. We're dedicated to our work. We're passionate about our work, right? And most times, the thing that gets neglected the most, right? It's us. It's our care. Sometimes we don't even notice until we're sick, right? And then we are forced to to sit down. We're forced to take these days that we that we didn't want to take because we were feeling guilty about it. Right? That's a lot of hands, folks. And I don't know if anyone else like took a look at that, but that's almost half of this group that's experienced some level of burnout. And it's common. I think I know for myself, that is something that I've, for a long period of time, I just accepted as being part of my role, right? That feeling burnt out is going to be something that I experience at working in education. Like, it's something that I won't be able to avoid. Guess what? That's not true. It's a myth. Don't let anyone tell you that being burnt out has to be part of your life as an educator, because it does not. But what it does take, right, is some time. The same way we spend all this time creating our curriculums or our plans or organizing schedules and all this time that we spend around organizational things as working in educational spaces, each person in this webinar has the capability to be just as strategic with their self-care, just as strategic with their rest, right? It doesn't have to be that you are going on a long trip or that you are, running 5 miles a day. I'm not running 5 miles a day. I'm not a runner, first of all, but what are some ways that you can incorporate just incremental moments for ease? I tell folks, like, some accessible practices, even if it's just the first thing in the morning, right? Because I think especially if you're a parent or you're caring for a family, the minute you open your eyes, it's game time, right? And usually the eye opening is happening because someone has a need, right? But before that, if you can, schedule some time to even just check in with yourself first thing in the morning, right? I am not a morning person, but I do schedule, like, I get up earlier, slightly earlier than I wake up. And I just run down what I did with you all in the beginning. How does my body feel? I just woke up. How does my body feel? Like, does my neck hurt? Does my back hurt or anything like that? What kind of thoughts are crossing my mind? Okay. What is my emotional state like right now? How is my heart? Is it heavy? What am I carrying with me right now? What am I going to need to get through this day so that, like, I feel like I'm supported? Do I need to, like, talk to someone, like reach out to a friend or, a family member and have a check-in? Like, do I need to get some fresh air? Like, what are some things that I need to do for myself before all the energy lines start to come in, right? For students and schools, work, family. Even if you just take 5 minutes in the beginning of the day before you put your feet on the floor to get out of the bed, you could put that in your phone as a reminder. I'm going to do a 5-minute check-in every day. The same way you have alarms for a series of things, I'm sure, on your phone, right? What are some ways that you can start to invite ease and these concepts, of self-care? How can you make sure that you're staying hydrated? Because I'm sure we all know, we tell our students all the time, are you drinking water? Is your water bottle full? Did you have some water? Right? Did you have some water though, sir, ma'am? Like, did we have water? Hydrating is a number one thing too for mood and even just how you feel in your body. Your body feels really tight and restricted when you're not well hydrated. We also know that our temperament is not the best when we're not hydrated. These are little things. When you get in the shower, take a second and just acknowledge the way the water feels touching your skin. That's a self-care, like, mindfulness practice. When you're eating your lunch, did you enjoy it? Do you remember how it tasted? How it smelled? Think about what you had for lunch today, if you even stopped to eat your lunch. But even just acknowledging something as simple as a meal, so that you're having a moment to just really have some pleasure, right? And enjoy something. These are very small incremental things that we can do, you know, just to begin these practices, right? Like I could talk to you for 3 hours about about all of this. I'm trying to just give you some things to think about. None of these are like groundbreaking phenomena. These are not new concepts, but they're just reminders. Okay, so some resources. All right. One book that has been really, really, really valuable to me is this Rest, Pause, Be book. It is a beautiful book. Um, it shares a lot of ideas about wellness and self-care that are very accessible, right? Things that you could do without spending any money at all. The other book in terms of like movement, because I am a yoga person, right? And that is my practice of choice, but Restorative Yoga for Ethnic and Race-Based Stress. It's a beautiful book. And it really starts to dig into like how folks of color are encountering trauma and stress and how it lands in the body. And I really think the book is good for anyone, whether you have a diverse background or not. There are several other books. I have a resource list that I'm going to share with you all post webinar. Okay. These are the ways that you can find me on social. If you're interested in finding me on social, if you are curious about any of these things that I've shared, if you want to talk more, I'm always happy to give resources. I have so many things to share with you that I'm really excited about because an hour is not enough, although I feel so grateful to have been asked to share this time with you all. And I'm really hoping that it has proven to be like helpful, or that it's at least inspired some wheels to turn and some thoughts to begin to kind of grow. Hopefully I've planted some seeds. We have like 9 minutes left. So,
Well, I do want to share that there was a question that was posed to you.
oh,
Um, and the question is that what are your thoughts about the Nat Bishop and
yes,
or book Rest as Resistance? One of our members who actually posted this, Patricia,
yes.
said that she began following the Nat ministry about 2 years ago. So she wanted some input from you on
I
what your
see.
thoughts were.
Yep, I see it now. So I will say that I bought that book when it first came out because I love the Nat Ministry, and the Nat Ministry is like, to be honest with you, when the book came out, I was like, oh no, I should have written a book first. Let me tell you, that book, if I could give any book to like every person in education, that would be one of the books. Like I said, these are not groundbreaking concepts, but they are accessible, and I think they call us back into ourselves. I completely support that book, and the name of the book is called Rest as Resistance. Rest as Resistance. I wish I had a copy, but I gifted my copy to a friend who works for BPS as a gift because she she needed it more than I did. I read the book, and that's what I do. I read and gift. But it is called Rest as Resistance, and I can also put it in the resource folder that I will share. But it is a beautiful book. It gives some practices that you can do. It gives ideas on how rest is a resistance practice. Let me see. Can you share some centering practices like you use at the beginning? Yes. So something that I think is something that we are experiencing globally, right, is the disconnection from our bodies. I think in general, as a society, a human society, that we are disconnected from how our bodies experience things. So a centering practice, no matter if you're laying down, standing, I tell people they can do this at a bus stop if you were at a bus stop and needed like a moment. Just taking a second, acknowledging if you're standing, acknowledging where your feet are, right? Where you're standing, acknowledging that in the moment that your body is safe, that you are in connection with the rhythm of your breath, like your life force energy, right? Maybe rolling your shoulders back and just taking a moment to like acknowledge the movement of your breath in your body. I also do this with students all the time. Okay. Like I tell them, like, we're going to take a moment. You can place your hand on your belly. You can place your hand on your chest, tuck it into your collar and maybe feel your skin. And we're all just going to take a moment and follow our breath. But I think grounding, acknowledging the stability of your body can be very centering. I think breath, just natural breath, it doesn't always have to be like deep breaths because sometimes deep breathing can be triggering for some people. But being in rhythm with your natural breath, as I mentioned, like indulging in your lunch when you have it, enjoying it, the smells, like the taste, the textures, showers, baths, like noticing the temperature of the water as it touches your skin, um, daydreaming, which I really encourage adults to do when you have, even if it's I'm just going to daydream for 3 minutes. What does that look like? I'm looking out the window. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just, there's birds, there's sky, there's sun. You know, if it's a warm day, acknowledging like sensation, acknowledging sensation can be very grounding. And again, because I said we're so disconnected from our physical bodies that we could walk outside for a whole block on a sunny day and not acknowledge how the sun feels on the back of our neck, right? Like because we're so distracted. But just taking moments to re-engage, to pull yourself back into your body it's important because you just have at the end of the day it's just us, right? It's this heart and this skin jacket that we have, right? That's covering everything. And it's just really important to stay connected to yourselves. It's important. There's so many different ways I could go on and on, but I think breathing, being present, grounding through your feet, things like this. Yeah. Hopefully that's helpful.